talking about myself, my name is Hasnen. I was a Flutter engineer, but then Ashwin told me that if you know few concepts, then you're going to be a mobile engineer. So I think I'm a mobile engineer. So I made that change after the. Uh, I am also open source contributor at Flutter, founder of Flutter Brewery. It's an Instagram package where I do some crazy animations. So you can go ahead and check it out. Speaker at various meetups and conference. Let's talk about Flutter shaking hands with React Native. How many of you have you ever got a chance to work with React Native? That's great. Being a Flutter developer, we always have a kind of controversial talk with the React Native developers that we are great at performance and React Native is not that great and Flutter framework is great. But believe me, they are doing their own job at the best way and we are not on the wars. So it's always to be, take it as a very great things what they have developed in terms of Flutter framework as well as on the React framework. Now, I will be talking about if you have an existing React Native app, how you're going to use it on your Flutter site. But the first question comes to your mind is that why do we need that? Do we really need that? If you think of that you have an existing React Native app and you want to run your Flutter app and React Native app together in a one APK, this sounds crazy, right? I mean, how can we make two different frameworks work together? So here is the story how this came into the picture. One client comes to us and says that we need an application where we have a huge user base. I'm pretty much sure you're using that application. I'm not allowed to share the name of the client, but you're using that application and you're cursing that app daily because it's built in React Native and have a lot of performance issues. So the client come to us and ask us to develop a Flutter application and says that we have a very huge base, very huge user, maybe a lot of users, and we do not want to lose those users and develop an entire Flutter application from the scratch because it will take a lot of time as well as it will take a lot of resource as well. So they were like, we have a React Native app. Please do something that we should be able to use a new features in a Flutter side, a new screens on the Flutter side, and existing screens on the React Native side. So when these questions came to me, my reporting manager came and asked me that how we are going to do this. Is it even possible? I reached out few experts in the community, and I got an article from one developer saying that this is the company which has already done this. But there was not a clear or a clean way, explain a clean way of doing this on the technical side. So I got around 3 days to build this because on the 4th day, there was a demo call set up and I was having 3 days. So I kept all my research work and then I built something which using the article which I got from that company. So the company explained me that you always have to look into that there is a world of coexistence. You should not always think of, okay, how many of you have worked on a code base that, let's say maybe a developer X has built that application and maybe you joined a company and then you started working on the code base on the developer X and you're not able to understand what's happening with that code. And then you will be like, okay, I'm going to write this from scratch because I'm not able to understand. But I guess that doesn't work that way. You have to always consider the things that we always make out what is existing. So even when the will was developed, it was using the legacy, it was using the basic principles of developing a will, right? But whatever applications what we're using today was not same previous a year back or maybe 2 years back. So the world of coexistence help us a lot in terms of engineering as well. So the first question comes to your mind is that how can we make your React Native and Android to be a one app and run it as a single APK or single IPA and publish it to the stores? Now, if you see on the left-hand side, there is an Flutter app architecture or a folder structure. And on the right-hand side, you have a React Native. And you see two common folders in that, and that is Android and iOS, right? Now, we saw add to app, which was pretty much similar to what I have done over here, right? So you basically, what you do is you call your iOS native screen from the Flutter side. That's what we'll be doing. I'll be showing it on the Android side, right? So I'll be having a React native app, not a native app. So now you have two folders over here, which is very common, Android and iOS. We'll be taking a closer look on the iOS side, on the Android side, sorry. Now, I'll come to this afterwards, but I want to have one thing as a question. Which app do you think it's written in Flutter, and which app do you think it's written in React Native? Right, the app with the number is written in Flutter, and then the app with the number 7 is written in. And why do you find it that this is a difference? So, okay, you find it debug, but if you know the helpfulness of the Flutter, that if you write a button, you get a very pretty designed button, right? Now I have done the same thing on the both application. On the left hand side, I have written elevated button. I have got a pretty much nice button, but on the other side, I have to literally write a CSS and putting some. So if you are a bad designer, this is how your app will look like with a number 7, right? So now let's go ahead and do one thing. Let's go ahead and take this into an action. Now the requirement was pretty much clear that they have an existing React Native app. They have their state management technique used as Redux. I'm not sure whether you guys are aware of Redux state management on the React Native side, but like the way we use provider, in the same way on the React Native side, the popular is Redux. So they had a Redux, as well as they have their own local storage for the token management and stuff. When user logs in, we have to manage their tokens as well. So the crazy requirement over here was to first run both the application as one bundle, and then even store, even access their stores, local storage from the React Native side, and also access the state management from the native side. Now, when I started this, I was pretty much like, I was not knowing how can I do this, because it sounds crazy to club two different frameworks into a one framework and then build it as a single APK, right? Now we'll see this into an action. So this is the Flutter demo homepage, and what I'll be doing is, once I click on the open React Native view, it will basically launch a React Native app, right? So this will launch a React Native app. Now, if you see over here, I have a simple counter app written over here. So this is the React Native view. I'll just increase. So this is being, if you see over here in the code base, I have used dispatch function. This is basically a dispatch function for the Redux store. So this counter is being stored and updating the value into a state management technique using Redux. So now this store needs to be accessed on the Flutter side as well, right? Now, if I go back, which will again take me to the Flutter side, and if you'll see that I'm able to retrieve the data which was there on the React Native app. So we are able to communicate between React Native and Flutter. Now the question is, how is this possible? Now, this was about the React Redux store, but we'll also take a look on the local storage. How do we share the data using local storage? So again, if I'll open the React Native view, I'll increment the counter, and I'll read the data from the local storage of React Native, right? And send it to the Flutter. So data is sent, and if you'll see, I have a JSON which basically holds the email, the username, and the token of, I'm not sure whether it is visible, but it's the over here, it's the entire JSON. So this is how we are sending data from React Native side to the Flutter side. And also, it is possible to send data from Flutter to React Native side. Hence, we are able to communicate both the sides. Now, the question comes in, how do we able to communicate from two different frameworks? Now, why did I call myself as a mobile developer, not a Flutter developer? Is because I was able to achieve this writing a few stuff of code on the Android native side, not on the Flutter side, right? So when it comes to a development part, being a Flutter developer is really cool, but you really need to have this skill of adding and maybe progressing to learn on the native side, because the possibility is endless. You feel so powerful if you are working on the native side. So make sure you add this skill, because I'm pretty much sure that this is going to help when you're going to develop some crazy product, right? Now, over here, as I said, we have two common folders, Android. So basically, if I have from my lib folder, from my main.dart, I can communicate with the Android folder. Now, these Android folders are common in between, and if I merge them, then this is how my project structure is going to look like. So I have the entire React Native and Flutter app in a single folder structure. So if you see, this is my React Native configuration. If you see over here, package.json, this is my React Native configuration. So over here, this is where the React Native is installed, right? So it's on the root project, package.json, and also on the root I have pubspec.yaml. So this is where they are sharing their configuration. Now the entire configuration is over here, and the common folder what we see over here is Android and iOS. Now to communicate with two different frameworks, what we do is we go to the common thing. What we have a common thing over here. We have Android as a very common folder. So what we do, we use method channels on the Flutter side to communicate with the Android, right? And we used custom native modules on the React Native side, which is a kind of method channel being called as custom native module on the React Native side. So if I go inside my Android folder, and if I see inside my app source, and if I go to the main, inside Java and RN Flutter, so I have 4 different files over here. The one is main activity, which is of course coming from the Flutter side, and the one is my React activity.java, which is available to launch your React Native app on the native side. So now what I do over here exactly is I communicate with this folder to send the data using method channels from the Android and custom native modules from the React Native side. So let's try to understand how can we make this possible on the Android side. Now you have an Android folder common. What you do is from your Flutter side, you need to add the dependencies on the native side, which will allow you to compile your React Native app on the Android side. Flutter, of course, Flutter Android folder will not have these dependencies, whatever you see over here. You can see this. This is the React Native Gradle plugin, which will allow you to compile your Flutter application, your React Native applications on the Flutter side, right? So basically, we need to modify these 3 things. This is basically called adding React Native to an existing Android app. So this is the same thing. If you have a non-Flutter application, it's just an Android native application. Also, you can add with the same configuration, you can add the entire React Native application to the Android application. So these are the basic steps to do it. You add the dependencies so that Android native can understand how I am gonna compile React Native things on the Android side. So these are the native dependencies, what you see in the build.gradle on the root level, and on the app level, we have build.gradle, which is a configuration of your React Native, right? Now, on the other side, in the settings, you're seeing over here, if you are a React developer or you're a Node or a JS developer, you highly depends on the Node modules, because that's where all your JS dependencies comes in, or TypeScript dependencies comes in. So now you have dependencies on the JS side as well, which we are reading from the Node modules. So if I go to my project and if I show you over here, I'll be having a Node modules installed as well. So over here, I have the Node modules. So basically, I'm merging the entire project of Flutter and React Native at the root level so that I can configure it and use a same Android folder to make it run on both the sides. Now, this is the basic configuration. Now, this is just 3 steps, but this took me to understand what's happening over here. It took me around 3 days to figure it out, how I'm going to make my React Native application inside Flutter. Now, let's try to understand how do they communicate with each other, right? Now, on the very first step, if you see over here, what's happening on the React Native side is that if I click on Open React Native View, basically that is launching the React Native screen, which is going to the native side and then triggering this view. I'm not going to jump inside the Java code what I have written over here, but I'll just show you a basic thing is that I have a method channel written on the Dart side, which basically communicates on the Flutter side, Flutter native side, on the Android side. So you can see over here, I have created a new method channel, and the method channel over here is start RN activity. So basically what happens over here is I create an intent with saying that launch this class, which is basically a React Native view, what you see with that counter. I also attach Flutter engine on the as an put extra, so that I can access this Flutter engine on the React Native side as well, right? And then I simply start the activity that basically launch the React Native activity on the Flutter side. Now, along with this, there are many things needs to be set up, which I cannot go inside because it's very much technical. But I'll just show you a basic thing where how we are sharing the data. So if I go to my custom native modules, what I'm doing is I have a channel, which is basically a method channel over here again, which invokes receive message channel, which I have set a handler on the native side of, not on the native side, but on the Dart side, where I will put all the results and then create a bridge and send a message from one framework to another. Now, once we, however, we build our Android application, it will get built in the same way. And this is how we'll be able to communicate between two different application. So the point over here is, if you know a bit of native, the possibility is endless. You can do crazy stuff. Because when I did this, I was pretty much confident on I can develop anything now, because when I started, I felt like this is crazy. And when I connected with different developers as well, they were like, not sure how to do this, or not sure whether this is even possible, right? So now this was opening the React Native activity using a method channel. Now this is how we are sharing a message from React Native side to Flutter, or Flutter to React Native, is that we always go to the native, we create a custom module on the React Native side, send a message from custom module to the Android native, and Android native sends or invoke a method channel, which we have set in handler. If I can quickly show you the handler on the, so remember this receive message, I'll just go ahead and search it. So here in my main.dart, I have created a method channel where I have created a handler. So now I'll just set a debugger over here. And what I'll do, I'll just go over here and just do an increment. So do you see that as soon as I did an increment, the message was passed from that channel to over here. And you can see the arguments over there. The arguments, what I'm passing over there is the counter increment, that is 1. And this is the method, which is called receive message. So whenever the method name is going to be a receive message, I'm going to take that message as a string, pass it to an integer, give it to the counter, so that I can see that counter on the Flutter side. So I'll just remove the debugger, continue it, and go back. So I'll see 1 over here, right? So this was a very seamless integration to merge to different applications. If you have any questions regarding this, maybe I can answer it up. That's all from my side. I am ready to answer your questions if you have any. Yeah, please.
Instead of React Native, it is Unity. The one problem I am facing is from main activity is the one which extends.
Okay. Before we go much dive into the questions, I am not an expert native side developers, so I'll be only able to answer the questions if it is more on the Flutter side.
Yes, on the Flutter side. So what is happening is when I come back to Flutter from the previous activity, it gets killed. So is there any way I can recover?
So it's
from
basically
it starts from main function.
Okay, so it's basically something like this. Right now I have 1 over here, which is basically on the React Native side. If I go back, it should be 1 always. So basically we are not able to maintain this state.
Context.
Yes, so we are not able to maintain this state from React Native side to a Flutter side, or Flutter side to React Native. It's just very simple. Again, it's just a business logic that if the React Native activity is already initialized and having few data, you should not reset it. I mean, this is just a very basic POC which I am showing you over here, which doesn't handle that edge cases. But again, you are able to communicate, so you can handle any kind of edge cases which can be given. So it's just like once you communicate with once you've already communicated with the activity, you should be able to manage the state. More questions?
So I have a question that when you are combining the files and folders of React Native and Flutter, wouldn't it increase the app size too much? And how do you optimize the app size in this case?
Okay, so the very first thing is right now what we are trying to do is we are mainly focusing on the business side where we have to compromise on few things, right? I don't want to lose my existing users as a company. I have like 1 millions of users. I don't want to lose those users, right? So in that case, what happens? You cannot keep your app as always half app in the React Native and half app into the Flutter. You should be taking a consideration of that. In future you're going to migrate React Native screens to Flutter eventually, right? So you're not going to develop the entire app from the scratch, but what you'll do with a time, you will change one module or migrate one module from React Native to the Flutter. Once the module is migrated, you might delete the expected files and you can reduce. Now the problem over here is if you're going to keep your React Native application same as it is and keep adding a new activities or a new features into an Android side, then into a Flutter side, then there is a no sense of having a hybrid framework, because you always have to go to the native side. You have to always type a code on the native side. So again, if you are a hybrid or a cross-platform developer, then this doesn't make sense. Again, you need to have a developers who can work with the iOS and who can work with the Android. So this is for a time period until you migrate your React Native app towards the Flutter side, right? Once you change the module, once you migrate the module, you can delete those existing folders, and gradually you can come fully on the Android Flutter side. And on the Flutter side, you know how we can reduce the packet size.
Thanks.
More questions?
You showed like how to move from navigate from React Native to Flutter. Like, do you have any working example to move from Flutter to React Native?
So it's just like what I'm doing over here is, if I can just show you. Initially, what I'm doing is I'm launching the main activity, right? Okay. So my Flutter engine, when I will run a project on the Android side, Flutter engine will always go ahead and look for the main activity, right? Okay. Okay. Now in the same way, if I want to give an init screen to be of my React activity, that can be changed on the native side. So right now, what we are doing is we are doing a main activity, which basically Flutter engine will always look for this class main activity, because it's a Flutter project, right? And the configurations over on the Flutter side is always they look for the main activity, which is extending a Flutter activity. But that can be, of course, done using a change over here. But again, I'm not a native developer, so that is possible basically.
Okay, like because currently I have one POC that I'm working, so that needs like I have to open an Flutter way from React Native. So
yeah. That is possible. I have this entire project on the GitHub.
Yeah,
maybe you can just go ahead and take a look.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.